Good afternoon. That's what I like, a Southern response. You know, in this country, we incarcerate more people than anywhere else in the world. We incarcerate at a per capita rate that's greater than Cuba, or Rwanda, or Russia. Between 700 and 800 Americans out of every 100,000 are incarcerated. And on any given day in the United States, you will find hundreds, not thousands, but hundreds of thousands of people sitting in jail cells without lawyers who haven't even been charged with crimes. If you were in Alabama 85 years ago, you would have been watching a tragedy unfold about young boys who got off the train in Paint Rock and were accused of having raped a white woman and who were protected from a lynch mob by the National Guard, and who between these 9 children had one lawyer because no lawyer in town would represent them. And 18 years ago, if you walked into a federal jail, you would have seen one woman who had an 8-year-old daughter waiting at home for her. And had a lawyer who hadn't really even bothered to tell her what might happen. A woman who walked into court one day thinking that she was going to take responsibility for a mistake and found herself standing there dumbstruck when she found out that she was never going to walk out of that courthouse again, and that her baby who was waiting at school was never going to see her mother again. And that's here in the United States of America. And what we're here for today is because an enormous partisan divide is in our country, and yet right here, right now, what we have are people on both sides of the political aisle who are saying enough. People on both sides of the political aisle who have come together to form this center. People on both sides of the political aisle who have come together to form campaigns for justice. That's what we're here for. So, my name is Pam Metzger, and I'm the new director of the Deason Family Center for Criminal Justice Reform. And it is my very great honor to be here today, not only with the man who inspired us, Doug Deason, but with a team from Cut 50, which you'll hear more about in a moment, with SMU's own Brittany Barnett, who's a hero the way every lawyer can be a hero, with her client, Sharonda Jones, who is an example for all of us, not just of hope, but of endurance and of belief. So here's the thing. This is about right now. And what I mean by that is, Dr. King talked about the fierce urgency of now. In my faith tradition, there's a scholar who says, if not now, when? Everyone here in this room is here because we have said, when is now? When is now? Reform is now. Taking on the system of mass incarceration in the United States is now. There is a fierce urgency to now. And that's why we're here. Today, Today, we're going to get to hear from a really wide range of people. You know we're going to be hearing from Doug Deason, from Dan Jones. But what partly has brought us together has been this amazing organization, Dream Corps, and its subsidiary, Cut 50, which has as its goal reducing mass incarceration in the United States sanely, smartly, effectively by 50%. 50% fewer mothers worrying that they're never going to see their babies on the outside. And 50% fewer children who know they're going to see their parents come home at night. Jessica Jackson Sloan, who's here with us today, is a human rights attorney who began her career where now matters, on the death row of California, working with inmates there. She now works with and oversees Cut 50's efforts to end mass incarceration. She is an advisory member of the American Constitution Society. She represents Jared Huffman, who's a congressman on the Democratic Central Committee of Marin, and she's the youngest ever elected official in Marin County, where she was on the city council first and then became mayor of Mill Valley in November of 2016. Somebody else who understands what it means now. So it's my very great pleasure to introduce Jessica to all of you and to have her move us forward in our program today. Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon, Southern Methodist University.
Good afternoon.
It is so nice to be here in Dallas. I'm one of those rare folks who lives in California that actually misses the humidity of the South, not to mention the barbecue and the grits. So like Pam said, Cut 50 is so excited to be here and to have this partnership with the new Criminal Justice Reform Center. I first met Brittany Barnett, who you're going to hear from soon, when she was a corporate lawyer, and she's the kind of person that you just meet and fall in love with instantly. Her heart just shines through. She just glows with all the love she has. So we were very, very excited to be able to share her with the law school and create this real partnership. So Cut 50 is a national bipartisan initiative to end mass incarceration. And I'll tell you, for me, that mission is both professional as well as personal. When I was 22 years old, I lived in Georgia, and I found myself one day holding my 2-month-old baby while I watched my husband sentenced to 15 serve 6. Unfortunately, while I was pregnant, he had gotten addicted to methamphetamines. They were big in the construction industry where he worked. I thought, he's a good guy. I know him well. He just needs some help. Surely now that he's been caught, he's going to get that help. What I didn't realize is that he was never going to get help from the system. Instead, they were going to rip our family apart, force us into financial ruin, and cause my daughter to grow up the first 3.5 years of her life without her dad around. So I was feeling pretty lonely and pretty angry. I remember going to the visitation the first time. I remember being so embarrassed. I knew people who had done drugs, of course, had gone to high school, and they'd all ended up in rehab. I didn't know anybody who'd gone to jail or prison. But when I got there, I remember I looked around, and there were so many people who looked like me and who had stories just like mine, and who were there with their little bitty kids, trying to navigate getting in and past strip searches and figuring out, how close they could stand to the person they loved, whether or not they could touch their child. So for me, it became personal. I went to college, I went to law school, and I started representing death row inmates. You go to law school, you think you're going to go into direct representation. I got to say, I went to more than one cocktail party where somebody would ask me what I did, and I would say, well, I represent death row inmates. And they said, how can you represent those people? How can you fight for criminals? And it dawned on me that I didn't see them as criminals. I saw them as people. I knew their stories. I understood where they came from. I knew they were so much more than that worst decision they had made that day. So when I met Van, who you guys probably know as a CNN commentator, but I'm about to explain he's much, much more than that. When I met Van, we started talking, and he really coached me into turning all that anger I'd held into action. And we co-founded Cut 50, and Van's a good liberal. Some might say, or he might say, he's further left than Pluto. So I was from, living out in the Bay Area. So you might imagine my surprise when he calls me one day and says, I met this great ally. This guy's on our side. You got to come to DC. He's going to help join forces, and we're going to hold this summit on criminal justice reform. And I got so excited. And I'm like, that's great. Who is it? Newt Gingrich. Suddenly questioned every judgment I'd ever made about this man. But I got on that plane, and when I got to DC, not only did I find former Speaker Gingrich, but I also found your former governor, Rick Perry, in the studio that night over at CNN.
That's right.
You're mic'd up. And we started talking and realized, we actually had some common ground. We all wanted solutions to the criminal justice system. We all agreed it was broken. Maybe we had different reasons for thinking so, but we wanted to see people come home from prison. So it's been my honor this last 3.5 years to lead Cut 50 with the close advisement of Van, and to work with incredible people like Brittany, like Alex, like Sandhya, who are here today, to fight for both humanization, telling stories of people who are stuck in the system, like my husband was, like Sharonda was, putting a face to those numbers that Pam gave you earlier, making them count, making them matter, conveying why they're so important and what they could be doing in the world if they weren't behind bars. And then we have our legislation, which is actually working to bring people home and create opportunities for them when they get home. So Van is a CNN commentator. He's fearless leader going on there and talking about what's going on in the world, but he's also a Yale Law School grad. He's also the president of the Dream Corps, which is the organization that Cut 50 is an initiative of. And our goal there is to close the prison doors and open the doors of opportunity. So, of course, you're welcome to visit our website and learn more about that. But I'm going to call to stage the man you're really here to hear from, Van Jones.
I forgot about that. That's a true story. Newt and I had a TV show together called Crossfire, and we disagreed on everything. It was a well-named show, but we had to talk about criminal justice, and it turns out that Newt was critical of me at the commercial break because he said I was being too soft on the issue. And I said, what? He said, you're just talking about the racial justice stuff. I know that's your issue, but you're being too soft on it. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, I'm a conservative, and I see the prison system as it is now evolved. It's a big, failed government bureaucracy that's just gobbling up a bunch of money and giving bad outcomes. He says, I've got libertarians in my party, feels like it's gobbling up too many rights and liberties. And as a conservative Christian, where's the second chances? Where's the redemption? He says, so, you're being way too soft, you're pulling way too many punches. And I said, well, where you been all my life? And we got a chance to work together. But you know what? People with big mouths like me and Newt, we can agree on anything. Nothing's going to happen. It's just going to be talk until the people at the staff level decide to make something happen. And it would have stayed at the talk level had it not been for Jessica Jackson. So give her another round of applause. She's the person that really made it happen. So I'm especially honored to be here because I found out that this is the first event, the very first event for this center. So everybody here, whether you're on stage or not, is a part of something sacred. You're part of something special. The way that things start tends to be the way that they end. And so we're starting with people who care, people who come from different sides of the aisle. But when you're talking about human dignity and human liberty and whether or not we have a system that works as designed, that's not a partisan question. That's an American question. So we are going to welcome to the stage and have a conversation with a great American happens to be on the other side of the aisle, if you ask him his affiliation, you can have a different politics of the head and have the same politics of the heart. And that's what I would say about Doug Deason. Please come join us on stage.
Great to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. It's a big honor. And my friend Alex is going to have to get up and sit right there, so we can, because we will be here for 5 hours if I get where I can see you. Because I've been wanting to have this conversation for a very long time. So he's going to tell us when we've gone on too long.
Okay.
But first, just the basic question that everybody asks you, because there are so many issues out here that somebody with your time and your talent and your connections could be working on. Why, for you personally, criminal justice?
Well, I'd much rather be fly fishing on the North Platte in Wyoming than spending time in D.C. and especially in Austin, because we spend almost every week, 1 to 3 days a week during session. And of course, the beauty of Texas legislature is only meets for 4.5 months every 2 years, so there is some break from that. Mm-hmm. But it's something that I got involved in early on. Personally, it's just an experience with me when I was a teenager. Long story short, I was given the key to a friend's house. They'd been moved out of town. I grew up in Northwest Arkansas, and he was a Walmart executive. And so he said, be careful. You can stop by and make drinks. The liquor cabinet's stocked, but don't have a party. So it worked. And of course, teenagers, start hearing about it, and it turns into a party. And we started, so I look up and realize, gosh, this is a party. So I go out, can't get anybody to leave. So as I'm leaving, the police pull up and end up charging the instigators, another guy and me, with burglary, which was a felony. Ooh. And so it's pretty, I didn't appreciate what that meant for me. And frankly, I'd been arrested before and was arrested after, because I was kind of a partier in high school and college. But they were, minor possession, misdemeanors, that kind of stuff. And so, nothing I'm proud of, but I'm not ashamed of it either.
I'm just saying, this is going to be a much more interesting interview than I thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I didn't appreciate the felony, but boy, my mom did, So when the police called, I called her from the police station, and we actually had 3 jurisdictions. We had Rogers City Police, Bentonville, and Benton County. And the city attorney for Bentonville, where we were taken, was Asa Hutchinson, who's now the governor of Arkansas. Sure. So believe me, I've always supported Asa ever since. So Mom called him the next day and said, what do we do? Because my family's been up there since 1840, so we were not wealthy, but we knew everybody. And he just said, oh, well, Bonnie, don't worry about it. We'll just have him plead to a lesser charge of criminal trespass, which is a misdemeanor. So I was just really lucky. I got a $150 fine, 6 months probation, kept my nose clean. It was hard, but I did for 6 months. And so ever since then, whenever I've gone, applied to University of Arkansas, SMU, IBM, Cushman Wakefield, home mortgage, whatever, I never had to check that box. And I've always felt so blessed and so lucky. And so, as we've gotten more and more politically involved, and especially in Texas, I just realized that it was a great opportunity to kind of give back, and that's where I think I could make a difference. So we've been working for the last 4 years in Austin with our team, Justin Keener and Mark Levin, who's head of Right on Crime, part of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, but they're nationwide, actually worldwide, and we support them, and I'm very involved with the Right on Crime group, and we've made a difference.
Well, you have, and I would just go to say though that there are a lot of people who have also, sort of like there but for the grace of God,
right.
Kind of situation.
Right.
I got a chance to go to Yale for law school, and I didn't myself do anything, but I saw every drug imaginable being consumed by students at Yale. None of those kids went to prison.
Right.
They all, at worst, went to rehab, or at best went to rehab. 4 blocks away, there's housing projects you can see from the campus. Every kid there wound up getting some kind of charge at some point.
Right.
And suffering consequences. Same kids, same age group, within eyesight of each other, very different outcomes. We all know that.
Right.
I've told that story a million times. Nobody says you're wrong. but you made a different choice than a bunch of other people. So I'm not going to let you off the hook. Why?
Well, just for that very reason, because I mean, you know, I'm not a big religious person, but I do agree with where the Bible says, you know, to those to whom much is given, much is expected, or something along that line. But we are, you know, we're such a lucky. I'm so lucky. We're such a lucky family, and the United States of America is such a great place to be. Texas is a great state to be in. It's great to grow up in the South.
What's your mom like?
Oh, she's a sweet, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a really nice mom.
I mean, well, you have to say that.
Yeah, she's in Paris right now, believe it or
Yeah.
not, but she's awesome. So,
There's somebody in your family that got you to look at the world different. Your mom was frustrated with you. You're a troublemaker. You're out here doing terrible stuff, and yet somehow her sweetness is coming through you later in life.
well, Dad, you know, had a pretty good. My parents were divorced, but he was, you know, the message was always, you know, he'd get on the first airplane up to Fayetteville, and I'd come kick my ass if I, you know, he didn't mind if I'm going to jail for minor possession or whatever, but I better be respectful and treat my mom well and all that. So he was a disciplinarian from afar, and I was, you know, here in Dallas a lot, so I did a lot of the things that kids did growing up in Dallas, Texas. I just had the luxury of growing up in Northwest Arkansas with my grandparents and, you know, the farm, living on my grandparents' farm and that kind of thing. So it was a great way to grow up.
Yeah. Well, here you are now. You've got this center. What are you hoping the center's going to be able to do?
Well, I can't even believe that we're here, and you know, this is Jennifer Collins, my partner in crime on this, the dean of the Dedman Law School, and I were at dinner a couple years ago, and we hatched this, not even 2 years ago, probably a year and a half ago. We hatched this plan, and you know, it actually works. It's amazing it's fun to see something actually work, and then it's so great to have you here. Because, you know, as I've talked about it, it was announced, and we had our kickoff dinner and all that. People, you know, come up to me knowing that I'm a conservative, and they say, "Oh, that's great, a conservative think tank, criminal justice reform think tank." And it's no, it's not going to be a conservative criminal justice reform think tank. You know, criminal justice reform is nonpartisan, and so it's so exciting to be sitting here with you.
Thank you.
You know, and I've actually served he was a moderator on a panel that I spoke on 2 years, I think it was July of 15 in D.C.
Right.
And just tell it sort of real quick if you don't mind.
No, please. No.
Yeah, okay. So there were maybe 200 people at the Fair Justice Summit, and so they just kind of brought, you know, criminal justice reform leaders and advocates from around the country, and all, you know, from soup to nuts, from, you know, sentencing issues all the way through, you know, the issues in prison to reentry initiatives and all that. It was a really great summit. I guess it was the second one. I'd not attended the first. And so they just asked me to come tell my story and what we were doing in Texas, and I didn't know the format or anything like that. So we end up on this panel up front, and there's Mark Holden, who I'm close with and work with. Mark is the general counsel for Coke Industries. And I'm very active with the Coke organization and the Coke seminar programs, and they helped fund. We did matching grants for this center, and then there was Ann Milgram, who was the ex-attorney general for New Jersey, and then at the time worked for the Arnold Foundation, and then a man, I forget his name, elderly man, who was a part owner of the Boston Red Sox, really interesting guy who worked. His mission for 20 years had been, you know, preventing bullying and rape in prison. And so we did this. It was kind of, I think the panel was about, you know, private initiatives and private groups working on criminal justice reform. And so I had no idea. Only Mark Holden knew that it was Van was the moderator. And so Van had, you know, been protesting outside of the Coke seminars. So I remember I think it was Palm Springs. So when he comes out and she introduces him as the moderator, I'm like, oh shit. Because I thought, oh, Mark, boy, they ambushed Mark. And the whole crowd kind of goes like that. And he walks out, and Mark gets up, and they hug and slap hands. And Van goes up to the podium and said, well, that probably took some of you by surprise. And yeah, no doubt. And he said, we may not agree on many things, but we agree on criminal justice reform. And I love this man, and he's a warrior in the mission, and just had all kinds of great things to say about you. And when it came to Mark had similar compliments for you. So it was exciting.
Well, I'm glad you say that, and I hope that those of you here will take something from it, because Koch Industries, and we're going to be honest about it, Koch Industries, when I was in the White House, spent a non-trivial amount of money to get me out of the White House. They said my left-wing, berserkly youth background made me not a good fit for the White House. And I was very tough. And I resigned under fire from Koch Industries through Americans for Prosperity. And a lot of people, I think, expect that when you get into these kind of partisan food fights with each other, that you're supposed to just be enemies forever. You have one moment where you didn't get along, you have one thing you couldn't see eye to eye on, now we're just going to fight forever. But this issue has a particular kind of quality to it. I've never met anybody in prison who said, please help me get out of prison, but don't talk to any Republicans. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
And your own personal pains and those kinds of things start to get small when you start talking to people whose lives have been ground up. And you realize, geez, man, I had a job in the White House, but I got a job now. What can we do to really help people?
Right.
And that's why I admire what you're doing so much, because of all the places, isn't it ironic, of all the places where we can't get together across these party lines, what's happening in a prison cell is the one place that's so offends all of our values now, that it's where there's some actual healing beginning to happen. Now we got a long way to go. One thing that's in the way of you being successful, though, is how much money there is to be made by the status quo. I mean, you have prison guards union, you have prison towns, you've got private prisons. How do you think about the impact of money and just, I mean, you're climbing a big hill here.
Well, so are you, because we're both in the same fight.
Yeah, but
and
you got more money on the table. I just got to show up and talk.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, but you've got a huge goal, reducing the prison population by 50%.
Yeah.
And even if we reduce by 50%, we would still be one of the most heavily incarcerated nations on earth. So as worthy a goal as it is, it's going to be tough to get there, and we'll still be over-incarcerated. So it's, you ought to be cut 75. But the...
Don't encourage Jessica Jackson.
Because frankly, I don't even understand, what is prison about? Prison should be about protecting me, you, the citizens, from someone who's a danger or a menace to society. Using it as punishment is, that's like, why don't we just draw and quarter them, It's, of course, I can get up and carry on. You can't do that if you're drawn and quartered. But it's that draconian and that absurd of a way to, why would we punish people by putting them in prison, especially drug users and addicts? It's punishing an addict is the most asinine thing you could ever think of. And so, yeah, it's a huge battle. The beauty of the battle is that the far right and the far left really agree and really get along great on this. It's kind of those squishy people in the middle on both sides who it's kind of the status quo, and if it's just not broken down, fix it, and oh, I've got these other issues I need to work on, that's not worth the time and effort. And there's so many reasons. If you want to take the people's lives out of it, just the money saved. Texas has saved, over $3 billion so far, and is on track to save, I think, $5 billion over the next 7 or 8 years. And that's huge. We've closed 8 prisons in the last 6 years. And that's because of criminal justice reform. And so Texas is, we still have a lot of work to do, but we are leading the charge. And we use that, we go out to other states. And I've been going to D.C., some quietly kind of advising the White House through Jared Kushner's office on some of this stuff. And it's it's interesting how passionate they are about it. And when we spoke with Trump early on, when he was a candidate, and interviewed him and talked to him about why should we support you, one of the questions I asked him was, where do you stand on criminal justice reform? And he is, passionate about fair justice. So if you commit a crime, you should be punished, pay your debt to society, and then have an opportunity to become a productive member of society again. So, obviously I'm sure a lot of people feel that with Jeff Sessions' appointment as AG, that's not a very good sign. But I look at it as great because, frankly, it got him out of the way in the Senate so we can get some bills passed, like Senate Bill 2123, which will reduce mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug crimes. And furthermore, he believes in the rule of law. So let's give him better laws, He says, I'm going to enforce the laws that Congress makes. Great, now let's go. That's what I've told John Cornyn multiple times. Let's get pushed. Let's make Senate Bill 2023 top priority, and let's give them great laws, and let's make them stick to it, enforce it. And now we don't have to have them, railing against it on the Senate floor.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is an optimistic view, and one that's
it
good. Hey, listen, that's leadership, know. I have a couple more things. I think I'm getting close on time, but I want to ask a few more things because you mentioned a little bit about the drug stuff.
Right.
Now that's tricky, sticky stuff. We know that these laws aren't being enforced fairly.
Right.
If you decriminalize, you might have a situation where you have more drugs being used than you want as a society. How do you think about, from a bipartisan criminal justice reform perspective, how do you think about this question of criminalization, decriminalization, legalization? How do you deal with the drug question?
Well, just to say real quick, personally, I'm a libertarian when it comes to drugs. So I think that it's obviously prohibition didn't work for alcohol, and the war on drugs hasn't worked. So why not legalize drugs? Why not put them? At least the government can charge the tax. They love to tell people who they can marry so that they can tax. That's really just a form of taxation and control, just as the drug laws are. And so, obviously that's not going to happen. We're not going to have true drug stores on the corner where you could go get a gram of Coke or whatever. But that's how I feel about it. I really do. I'm not a libertarian because I happen to believe in a strong defense and have a different viewpoint on the military than most libertarians. But I do believe in personal responsibility, and that if someone can go in and buy a beer and drink it responsibly, they could go in and buy drugs responsibly. And why not try it? What we've been doing hasn't been working.
Good. I struggle with this question a lot.
Yeah, so do I.
My dad's an amazing guy, born in poverty in Memphis. Grew up in segregation and joined the military to get out of it. Everybody else running out of the military. My dad's running in the military trying to get out of Orange Mound. Put himself through college, put his brother through college, put his cousin through college. Married the college president's daughter, my mother, and then put me and my sister through college. But the whole time, hard worker, hard smoker, hard drinker. And the smoking killed him, and the drinking made him really just insufferably difficult as the evenings would go on. And so I've literally never had a glass of alcohol, never had a beer, never had a sip of wine and champagne, or wine at a wedding or champagne, nothing. Just because I didn't like that impact. And yet, so drugs, I barely take aspirin. So for me, the drug stuff is seriously, I'm against drugs. I can't pretend any other way. I haven't seen it benefit anybody. But what we're doing to people who want to take drugs or who are addicted to drugs or who are trapped in poverty and see that as a commodity that they can sell. Right. So they're committing crimes of either economic desperation or addiction or both is just unforgivable, just the dumbest, craziest. You couldn't come up with a worse way to treat people who are either poor or sick than this. And so I'm against the drug war, but I don't know what should replace it. And I wonder if, I think a lot of people are like me. You know, they wouldn't be proud to say, oh, my kids are on drugs. Like, that wouldn't be like,
right.
Yeah. You know, it's not, a great statement that anybody wants to make about their kids. At the same time, they're not proud to say, my neighbor's kid's on drugs and the government gave them 19 years.
Right.
They're not proud of that either.
No.
And so I think we're stuck, but I'm glad we've got a place to talk about it. Let me ask you another question.
Sure.
As you're thinking about how to pull not just the ideas, but some of the coalitions together, what is getting in the way? You mentioned that sometimes it's the squishy middle, et cetera, but it's not just a squishy middle. I mean, we are having a hard time in this country working with each other. I mean, on obvious stuff like this, opioids, addiction issues, education for kids. I mean, obvious stuff. And we can fight about immigration, and we will, healthcare, and we will. There's some stuff we're just going to fight about. We just don't agree.
Right.
There's stuff we agree on we can't work together.
Right.
How do you see it? What do you think is wrong? What do you think that liberals should be doing different, conservatives should be doing different? You must have thought about this a lot. What's going on out here?
I don't think there's a lot that the liberals are doing wrong, other than maybe sometimes they try to bite off too much, in one. I mean, you get there through legislation, generally. I mean, that's my attitude, and that's what I've worked on with the team is, changing legislation at the state and the federal level. And, we've assisted, or I personally have been involved. I guess Right on Crime has assisted 32 states, and I've helped with several, including when Mike Pence was governor of Indiana. We'd send him everything we had going on, and he's been great. And he still, by the way, is great on criminal justice reform. And Matt Bevin in Kentucky is great. We have some really strong Republicans, but I think that they understand the fact that you bite it off in little pieces. You can't try to ramrod it down anyone's throat. And sometimes, especially in Austin, I see that, and to a lesser extent in D.C., liberals trying to bite off more because they just want to make change, which is great. That's what we all want to do. But, you'd rather get a little piece and then go back and get a little more and go back and get a little more. And that's what we've done in Texas, and it's really worked. It started in 2005. I had nothing whatsoever to do with it. It was Jerry Madden and Judge John Creusot at the time, and and Governor Perry. And they made incremental changes. It's just gone all along the way, and we've been successful with that. Sometimes working with Democrats.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you that $3 billion savings is a great. I mean, that should be known more than it is. I mean, I work in the area, and I didn't realize that Texas had gotten that kind of a savings with no real increase in crime or any problems. Is that correct?
So it's absolutely correct. A reduction reduction in crime and reduction in numbers incarcerated at the same time. Yeah. I mean, it's right now the people incarcerated are 147,000, I think. Is that right?
Just went under 146.
Okay, just under 146 in Texas. And, that's where we were in the 90s. So we continue to, but think of where our population has gone from the early 90s to now.
It's boomed.
It's boomed. It's huge. So it's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. And by the way, we keep getting our fact check. You can see as we keep looking over here, get our fact check. I don't think it's possible to give Mark and Right on Crime enough credit for. Give a round of applause. We got one of the best minds in the business here.
He's the guy with the dirty glasses. He never changes his glasses.
No, that's me actually, and Alex too. Well, we're about to be out of time. I will say that part of the reason when I had the conversation with Newt, that Newt knew so much about the issue and was so passionate about the issue is because of his relationship with Right on Crime, way out front, way early, trying to figure out how to get the conservative values in alignment with what's happening in our criminal justice system. Because, liberty is a huge and important value for conservatives. If you're going to start taking the liberty away from people, you better have a really good reason and a really good process and a lot of oversight, and none of that's happening right now. 99% of the people go to jail and they've never seen a jury. They've barely seen a lawyer.
Right.
They're just pleading because the drug laws are so draconian that if I could pick any one of you and say, here's the deal, I'll give you, you've done nothing wrong, but I'll give you a felony sentence in 3 years, or we can go in front of a jury, you might get 100 years. You say, but I'm innocent. Say, well, you take your chances in front of this jury. A lot of you would say, I might just take my couple of years and get out of here. And so you have a lot of people who are in that situation. That's not just offensive to liberals, that's offensive to conservatives and to anybody with any theory of justice at all, left or right. And so I'm just honored to get a chance to be here. My great hope is that we've kind of whet your appetite for an even deeper discussion. And there's really nobody better qualified to lead a deeper discussion than the people who we're about to bring up on stage. Brittany has already been mentioned. I want to brag on Brittany a little bit. I'm going to let Brittany brag on Sharonda a little bit more, though I will brag on Sharonda a little bit too. Most people, once they leave law school, if they've made the decision to go into private practice, join the corporate bar, especially when you're young, you've taken on a lot of debt to go to law school. You get to a private corporate setting, you got a paycheck attached to that that's at least decent with an upside, a lot of support, a clear ladder to climb, and it is very sticky. It's hard to then say, well, never mind, I want to go do something else. Brittany went through law school, did really well, got to that corporate environment, and something in her soul told her that she needed to do something different. And she can tell her own story better than I can. But what's most remarkable to me is that really as an act of faith, as a leap of faith, she left that behind to try to help the people who in our system have been run over and crushed, but had an opportunity under the last administration to come home on clemency. And people think the clemency process is something like you see on the soap operas or whatever. The governor just sort of, calls somebody up and lets them out. It's a tough process, and most people don't even have the wherewithal to try. The most successful effort to get people home under the Obama administration for clemency was led by one person, and her name is Brittany. She's here. She's going to come up to the stage. And one of the people that Brittany was able to help, Sharonda, who did, I think, 16 years? 16 years and 9 months in prison for a ridiculously stupid set of reasons, was also able to come home. And the way that Brittany even found out about Sharonda is that she was in this building doing her great work and came across this case. And so we are now sitting here. You talk about getting goosebumps and teary-eyed. Yeah. We're now sitting here. You don't believe you can make a difference? You don't believe your choices matter? You don't believe the gifts that you've been given can't be made tremendous blessings for other people? I want you to take a big, long listen to Brittany and Sharonda. Get up on the stage.
Thank you, Doug and Van. It's me again, Brittany Barnett, Sharonda Jones, and I want to set the stage for y'all just a little more. When Brittany was a second-year law student, and how many of you here have been a second-year law student? So you know exactly how much fun that is. How many of you have lived with a second-year law student? Okay, less fun. Brittany had this moment, right, where she found a problem. And it wasn't just a problem in a book. What she had the vision to see, and what, quite frankly, Sharonda had grace to give her, was the connection to see that those words on the page and the number attached to the sentence were attached to a soul, right? They were attached to a person. And Brittany didn't just kind of move along the corporate ladder with it, with debt and a bar exam to take and a workplace to satisfy for 7 years. She stood by Sharonda's side to advocate for her for clemency. 7 years. want to give you some context. About 1,700 people were lucky enough to have their clemency petitions granted by Professor Obama. Professor Obama. He is a professor too. President Obama. I'll give them both. Seven of those people for whom the prison doors opened and they walked back out into life, 7 of them were Brittany's clients. And there's an 8th who I'm pleased to say will be working on that case through the center because Brittany doesn't let go. She doesn't forget and she doesn't leave you behind. So it's really extraordinarily special to have you both here. And I guess I want to begin by just saying thank you again because these are stories, but they're yours. And so particularly to Sharonda, I want to say thank you for being here and for sharing that with us because I think we all have to take a minute to acknowledge that this is painful, right? It's celebratory, but there is deep, deep pain here that doesn't go away for Sharonda and her family. And every moment that she's here with us is a real act of faith and courage for her too. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Well, we're a big mutual fan club, right? So let me begin by asking a why question. So Brittany, you're pushing through law school and you're going to corporate world, you've got a bar exam and you've got debt. Right? Why take this on? Why own this?
Why not? I came across Sharonda's case as a critical race theory student. I was a transfer from Houston, University of Houston, and the class was full. There were only about 16 students they allowed in the class, and I literally emailed the professor to beg him to be able to be in this class. So I say I wasn't even supposed to be in the class to come across Sharonda's case. And in the class, I wrote a paper about analyzing the disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine sentencing. And it was full of numbers. And I come from a corporate background. I'm a CPA as well. And I've seen numbers all the time. And I was tired of numbers. And so I really wanted to give a heartbeat to the number. And so I literally did a Google search to find a human story and came across the case of Sharonda Jones. So had not it been for the gracious professor letting me beg my way into the course, we might not be sitting here today. But because of the fact that it happened and I came across her case, there was no way that I could know that Sharonda Jones was serving life in federal prison. And to put that in context, there's no parole in federal prison. So Sharonda Jones was serving a fundamental death sentence as a first-time nonviolent drug offender. She'd never even been arrested before. And so as a law student reading that, I thought there was a little bit more to the story, right? There had to have been. And when I found out that there wasn't, we were under these mandatory drug laws that Doug talked about, there was no way that I could not have helped Sharonda after including her in my story. Her case just tugged at my soul.
So Sharonda, let me ask you this. Round 1 with lawyers was not so good.
No.
And in comes this young law student who says, oh, I'm here, I'll help. Now you're here now, but how was it sort of feeling the way you must have felt about your experience with lawyers and having Brittany come and announce, oh, I got this? What was that like?
I had tried for so many years. When she wrote me the letter, I was like, yeah, right. She was like, I'm here to help you. I was like, okay, whatever. Yeah,
And-
did not believe her.
So what made you change your mind?
She started visiting me, and we built a bond of communication, and she was like, no matter what, I'm going to get you out of prison. And so, like, at that time, I was in a really, I still get emotional because I can't believe, like, I'm here. I mean, this is real. So she was like, I'm going to get you out of prison. I was like, okay. So after we just started communicating with each other, I was in a dark situation. She started giving me hope. Like, she would always come give me positive words, like, this is happening. We're going to do a petition. Every day it was something different that made me want to live.
It's really wonderful. Brittany, when you started this journey with Sharonda, My guess is the end, this is not the end, the middle, where we are now, was probably unimaginable, right? When did you begin to have a sense, not just that this was hope, but that this was happening, and not just for Sharonda, but that you were going to be able to change lives, plural?
You know, it wasn't unimaginable, and I think that, you know, is why we're here, because I didn't know how, Sharonda didn't know how, but we knew that it was going to happen. And so I think it goes to just having to have the faith to believe in things you can't see, and to believe in that with conviction in your heart. Even though I was a law student, there was no doubt that she was going to, I didn't know if we would be 2017 or 2027, but it was very imaginable.
And let me talk for a minute about what that took, right? Because you were working full-time, and you did have debt, and as Van alluded to, there is nothing easy about the clemency process, right? It is an awful lot of work, and in fact, took a team, right, to make these kinds of things happen. How'd you do it?
I really wanted people to know Sharonda. And the more I talk to people about her, and my family today, they can tell you they probably felt that they knew her as much as I did, because I talked about her to everyone that I met, because I couldn't believe it was happening. And the general public didn't even know it was happening. And so that was shocking to me. And so I really wanted to raise awareness for the issue, and to really highlight the fact that life without parole is the second most severe penalty permitted by law in America, only second to the death penalty. But we have a drug offender, a nonviolent drug offender who'd never been in trouble before, who was facing such a grim reality. And so I wanted to raise awareness as much as I could. And so as an eager law student that doesn't know how to say no for an answer, I just started writing and speaking at churches and getting the law school involved, and really just wanting to amplify her voice, because I don't like to say I was a voice for the voiceless, because she has a voice. But I wanted to be a voice for her, because her voice was not being heard. And so that's what we did, and I wanted to show this special person that our laws had said she was basically unfit to breathe air as a free person ever again. And I wanted to show people that it takes a special type of courage to serve a life without parole sentence. It takes a special type of grace and dignity to live in a situation that undermines your humanity every single day, starting with day one when you get assigned a number. And so I wanted the world to ultimately see what I saw when I would go visit, and by any means necessary, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Sharonda, when you began to believe in Brittany, right, and you started seeing her pull together a team and a petition, you were living in a world with people who were facing similarly grim circumstances. Can you talk for a minute about what it's like to be on this side now and know that you have people who you loved, right, who you lived with and loved and cared for, who are still there?
Yeah, 16 years and 9 months was a long time, but there was many Sharonda Jones that's left in the prison system right now, and a lot of my friends, because prison was my family, and that's all I had for 16 years and 9 months. I left an 8-year-old daughter behind, but I was having to try to raise her over the phone with the 10 minutes a day calls. That was hard. But the friends that I left behind now, they still reach out to me, and sometimes it's like, why me, Lord? You know, why not some of them? I mean, Brittany was my hope, but where are they hope? Because they calling me, they emailing me. It's like, I don't know what to say, because it's not enough Brittany's out there to help. I overload her all the time, and she do as much as she can, but where are all the Brittany's at? You know, I made a bad choice. Nonviolent offender, never had a drink or smoke in my life, and I just turned 50. So I'm like, I know I made a bad choice, but sending me to prison for life, to die, was just unreal to me. Faith is what kept me going. When Brittany became my hope, without a shadow of a doubt, I knew I was getting out. Like, I was a model inmate. All the prison guards could tell you, like, they used me for everything. And I kept it going, so I believe my faith and me just showing the changed person that I was helped me get out.
So I'm going to ask this question back to Brittany. Because as y'all heard, Brittany was actually the first person hired to work at the center. Brittany got here before I did. It's a good thing, too. And I want to ask this question of you, and I guess to those of you out here who are law students and those of you who are lawyers, which is, where are the Brittany's? Because you brought some together for a clemency team, right? And that was through Cut 50. But where are the Brittany's and how do we find them? And I know your dad's over there nodding because he's not going to raise another, but... Well, if you want to come up here and make some, I would appreciate it. But I want to know from Brittany, because we are a community, right? You raised her to be something special, but here in the law school, we have this opportunity, right? As lawyers, you have this extraordinary power to change lives, right? It's not a fantasy. Brittany reached out and she touched somebody and poof, right? There was work. But from darkness into light, right? Where are the rest of the Brittany's and how are we going to get them engaged?
They're in this room. And this is an amazing start. I'm really grateful to be a Cut 50 fellow, but not only that, to be hosted by the Deason Family Criminal Justice Reform Center at my alma mater, where I really got the courage or was empowered enough to start taking on this work. And to do it, we have these conversations. We bring people like Sharonda Jones to the table to have these conversations, to show that these are real people, to show the human capital that's been sacrificed by misguided appeals for law and order, to show the genius that's been locked up for 16 years and 9 months, and also to really come together to show law students that are in this room, my colleagues, I see a lot of my colleagues who are attorneys in this room, that we have work to do and we have an obligation, in my opinion, to use our platform as attorneys to promote the greater good. It's no option. And to show the human faces, and I'm going to call out Jason Hernandez if he's here. Could you please stand up? So, Jason is a dear friend of mine as well, and of Sharonda's. Jason served 20 years of a life without parole sentence as a first-time nonviolent drug offender and received clemency from President Obama. But these are the people that you have to see, you have to touch, and you have to get close to.
And so where do we go from here? And you and I have been talking a little bit about a project that you want to launch. And I just want you, if you could tell the folks here for a minute about one of the things that we've got cooking.
Absolutely. So with the partnership between Cut 50 and the Deason Family Criminal Justice Reform Center, we're working on a project that will start with identifying every single drug offender in federal prison who is serving life without parole. You don't see these types of harsh sentences given out to drug offenders on the state level, very rarely, but there are about 2,500 on the federal level that we need to identify, we need to give heartbeats to. This system suffocates mass potential as it literally buries people alive. And so the project will be called Buried Alive, and we're going to give heartbeats and help bring the Jasons and Sharonda Joneses of this country home.
And Buried Alive is something that we're going to be working on. And for those of you who are in our community, and if you're here today, you're part of our community, we want to invite you to join with us on this and look for more information from us about that as we go forward. We are winding down, and so we're sort of out of time, but I want to take a minute and just acknowledge what just happened here, because it's true, it's our first event here. But it's also something very special, which is that we had actual conversations, not just between unlikely allies in terms of political aisles, right? But people from different states, from different lives, from different educational backgrounds. And what we're all here for is for now, right? Is to make this change now. To do what Brittany said, which is to say that it's not unimaginable, right? Which is to believe that we can take each other's hands and as a community, leave it ourselves, not just to sort of this idea of criminal justice reform, but to make criminal justice reform, to make it now, to make it together, to make it in a way that involves communities, it involves lawyers, it involves people. And we're here together for that. We're here today because Doug apparently had too much to drink with Jennifer one night and had a vision. whatever it was she was buying you, I'm buying you more. And we're so grateful for that and for this opportunity. It's a calling to be a lawyer. I deeply believe that. It's probably one of the few callings left in this world, right? It's a calling. And we're privileged to share that calling with Brittany and people like her, and privileged to enjoy a world that's a better place because people like Sharonda and Jason have rejoined us. So thank you all very much for coming. Please join us afterwards.